I'm Chelsea Rose. I'm a historical archaeologist at Southern Oregon University, and today I am at the Oregon Historical Society down in the archives to take a look at Peter Britt's Mule Shoe for Unearthing Oregon History. So Peter Britt was a Swiss-German immigrant that came to the U.S. with his family, first settling in Illinois before heading out to the West Coast in 1852. He first settled in Portland with his brother and decided it wasn't for him, so he headed south and found a spot on a hill overlooking the mining camp that would become Jacksonville. And as the story goes, he came down with a wagon with nothing but photography equipment and a $5 gold piece. What's notable about Peter Britt is his occupation as a photographer. He took some of the most striking images of southwestern Oregon and the people and the events and how the landscape shaped over time. One of the things that's unique about him as a frontier photographer is the fact that he settled in one place and he stayed put. One of the ways that he was able to build a life and stay put over time was the side hustle. What he got into was the packing trade. So he was what's called a mule skinner. So he had a team of mules and he would go to the coast near Crescent City and get goods and supplies and bring them back to Southern Oregon. When Peter Britt was young in Switzerland, he fell in love with the neighbor girl, Malia. So she ended up marrying someone else and immigrated to the US. Later, her husband died and Peter Britt found out about it and he sent her a letter with some money and he said, hey, here's some money. You can either use it to go back to Switzerland to your family or you could join me in Oregon. And she chose the latter and joined him in Oregon. And they went on to have 2 children and she also had a son, Jacob, from her first marriage. They had a very happy but unfortunately tragically short marriage. She died just 10 years later, leaving him with his adopted son and 2 children. Peter Britt raised those kids by himself, but he continued to pursue photography and the kids participated in that with him. So by the time Peter Britt dies in 1905, his children are basically living in the shadow of their father's legacy. So when his adult children died in the 1950s, his daughter Malia Britt and his son Emil Britt left the estate to the Southern Oregon Historical Society. The property is owned by the county, and we've done extensive archaeological excavations at the site. So really, we have so much information about this family and their life in Oregon. But this is the only thing that I've found that can be definitively linked with that short period of time where he was driving pack trains back and forth to the coast. So just looking at this object, it's very small. A lot of times when I've found mule shoes, they're more like kind of omega shaped, but sometimes the front and back hooves can have slightly different shapes. But it is pretty sturdy and it's hand forged by a blacksmith and there's some nails left intact and those also look to be hand forged. So this was reportedly given to the Oregon Historical Society by Peter Britt himself. And when I found that out, that was even more exciting because out of all the things that Peter Britt had and collected and did over his life, this is the one thing that he brought to Portland to commemorate his piece of Oregon history, and I think that's a really important thing about this object as well. One of the things that's interesting is we have a lot of really wonderful photographs that Peter Britt took. Landscapes, we have people. He has a huge collection of photographs of Chinese Americans. A lot of those can be dated to 1890s because that's when the Geary Act required Chinese individuals to have papers with the photograph in order to prove that they belonged in the United States. So there are photographs that kind of reference larger cultural and political happenings. When people talk about Peter Britt, a lot of times they think about the more typical kind of like big famous white man narrative. And what's lost is just like any story where you kind of go with the more stereotypical view of someone's life, what's lost is the nuances about Peter Britt and his position as an artist, as a widower, as a single father. And in fact, I read through all of his diaries, but the only time you can really see emotion in his diary was when his wife died. You know, his life was complicated, and He did a lot of really interesting things and had a really big impact on Southern Oregon, but we want to make sure to see the humanity in him and anybody we study in the past.